Welcome back, everybody. I'm Speaker, and I'm here with my friends Kathy Smith, Tara Urbanic, and Brent Roeder. Kathy is the Insectress. Tara is the worst case scenario girl, and Brent is the evil penguin. I'm Rob Hampson. You know me as Speaker to Lab Animals or via my former pen name, Ted Roberts, and we're here to fill in a little bit more in our apocalypse tips and survival snippets for the virtual Dragon Con 2020 Apocalypse Rising track. What we would like to talk about this time around is your apocalypse team. After all, it's really not going to be possible for isolated individuals to do everything that they need and have all of the skills that they need to survive. So one of the things that you need to do is to build your team, and it doesn't have to be a zombie apocalypse or the slow motion coronavirus apocalypse for you to need a team of people who will pitch in with you and help you get through the next natural disaster, whether it be a flood, a hurricane, a blizzard, a tornado, or anything, even an earthquake. We need to know who we can depend on, and we should probably be making friends and making contacts and connections now. So what are the types of skills we want in our apocalypse team?
I tend to think of people in terms of video games. Some people are damage dealers. They're your productive worker bees. They're people who jump in and get stuff done. And they are usually really great when focused on a task. As long as you are constantly giving them a task, they're happy. Other people are what I call support players. They're the people who provide the food, make sure everyone's eating on a regular basis, make sure everyone is getting enough sleep, making sure no one's getting burned out. And then you have your tanks. Tanks in this particular scenario are a little weird, but what I would say, tanks are people who handle the really heavy lifting. If there's an engineering problem, or if there's a security problem, if you find yourself holed up on the side of a mountain, for example, with your team. So everybody has their own individual roles, and it's really important to identify and be honest with yourself about what kind of contributor you are and what kind of contributor your teammates are.
Kathy.
Kathy?
Reliability. I mean, if you say you're going to do the thing, you need to follow through and do the thing. But that also requires having some form of supervision. And I don't mean micromanagement, because that can cause more problems than it solves. But, you know, have someone there, understand the hierarchies and the organization in your group. Who is ultimately responsible for that group? How is the power divided? And if there's a situation that needs to be resolved, who do you address, and how are you going to resolve those situations? So, and it tends to be more background to what Tara was saying. You know, Tara has the people who, the responsibilities and the worker and the nature of the contributors. This is, how do we keep those contributors moving? How do we resolve potential conflicts between them? Because those will arise. An apocalypse, be it fast or slow moving, is a stressful situation. And that stress is going to cause friction.
Brent?
So I think so two things. The first I think you need to do is consider what phase of an apocalypse you're in. Is it an immediate survival phase? You're trying to get away from, you know, the Sharknado right now, versus post-apocalypse, and you're trying to rebuild, you're trying to keep some semblance of civilization. So make sure when you're looking at people that you are planning for all phases of what's going on, not just the immediate. I think the second thing is also to kind of what Tara was talking about with support people, is you have some people that have a primary effect. So if you have an infantry squad, you're shooters in the infantry squad. And you have some people that enhance the effectiveness of others. If you have a medic in that infantry squad, you're going to keep the people in the infantry squad going longer, doing better. So you might have, say, someone who knows how to farm and know how to garden, and that's great. But then you also have someone who knows how to test the soil chemistry and can actually help you produce fertilizer properly for the soil needs. Well, that person on their own might not be that great of a gardener, but they're going to enhance the gardener's effectiveness at gardening. So look at not just the primary efforts, but who can enhance everyone else's work.
I think it's also important to keep in mind that not only are you looking at phase, but you should also be looking at how long this current phase is going to last. I love to look back at Niven and Purnell's Lucifer's Hammer. There is a character who was a scientist at Jet Propulsion Labs who had the books, he had the knowledge, and he essentially, when he got to his survival enclave, his survival group, the people that took him in, they had to provide a lot for him, but he was the wizard. He was the wizard that was going to help them figure out how to restore electricity, how to make certain antibiotics or other chemicals that they might need, how to tan leather. He also had information on best ways for preparing and preserving foods. And this was a person who would not be high on the survival list, a person who most definitely could not survive on their own. He needed to be taken care of. But for long-term survival, he was absolutely necessary.
That's a really important point. Everyone has a resource cost, and some people's resource cost is higher than others. And an important factor, and it sounds super cold and calculating, but if you're really in a crisis, you need to consider how much do I have to handhold and coddle, and how much resource time do I have to put into someone, and what do they do for the team? You may find yourself with someone who doesn't want to contribute or said they did and doesn't want to, and all they're really doing is eating food that you are fighting to store and taking up space. It can be a tough situation, but hopefully if you're thinking about it ahead of time, you have sort of narrowed that list down a bit.
Yeah, a number of us have jokingly talked about our survival redoubts. We would, okay, person A is going to relocate to site B where they're going to meet up with person B, and then the two of them or their families are going to relocate to site C where they'll join up with yet another group. And we keep talking about this. It becomes much more difficult if we're talking about disruption of long-range travel, and persons A and B are 1,500 miles away from person C. But we could look around us. Who in our neighborhood hunts? Do we know? Do we know who fishes? I had an employee who, between hunting and fishing, supplied 75% of the protein for his family for the year. Doesn't live here. He lives 60 miles away. Are we going to relocate there? Other considerations. Who's the dental hygienist in the neighborhood, or the nursing assistant, or the physician's assistant? Who's the veterinary assistant or the veterinarian in your neighborhood? These are all the different things that we should be thinking about.
I think one thing people also tend to forget is who has kids, how many, and how old are they? Because you quite often see people talking about, well, I have my zombie apocalypse team, and there's no real planning for dragging, a 3-year-old along.
Right.
And, that's another thing that a lot of your depictions of apocalypses tend to overlook, is that even in the worst of times, people still have kids. Families are still going to happen. Kids are still going to be born. The circumstances under which they're born can be more difficult or more primitive. The circumstances they're born into may be more difficult, but they're still going to be there. If you're planning long treks to meet up, but suddenly you've got a 3-year-old along, that might no longer be possible.
But also keep in mind that our kids can be part of the resource as well. On a farm, 5-year-olds are probably out gathering eggs.
Oh, yes.
Or they may be carrying the kitchen slop bucket out for the pigs.
Oh, yes. I did
And,
both of those as a 5-year-old.
and once the kids are 8, 9, 10 and have enough body strength to be doing more, they will be doing more.
But
And
if you
so
have a clutch of toddlers, someone who might not have been that useful before, all of a sudden might be super critical as the babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
actually that person you need to protect for a few years until you can start rebuilding your tech could be your babysitter and teacher in the interim.
Yep.
Yeah, we had some nice snippets in conversation yesterday when Sandra Medlock was with us for our videotaping, and she talked about not forgetting that we need to keep in mind the fine arts, and those are things like an acoustic guitar, an acoustic piano, a recorder, flute, or anything that is a simple unpowered instrument that we can use just for entertainment. Because sitting around in the evening when everybody is worn out, a little bit of music may go a long way to help keeping up morale.
The bard might be useful for more than just seducing the dragon.
This is true. I was about to say this may be the ultimate purpose of the bard.
Yep.
One other thing is Tara was talking about project managing. Post-apocalypse, you're going to have a lot more smaller projects going on as opposed to being part of, say, some massive company where you tend to be plugged in as a cog. So people that can project manage, even if they're smaller projects, that's going to be important because you're not going to have time for, lower level management and middle management and senior management and executive management and double plus executive management all micromanaging and sending emails about, how to build that water mill.
Right. And a lot of that goes back to what Kathy says, is you need to invest people with the power to make those decisions. But also, you all have a friend, whether you know it or not, who loves to make lists. I am that person in my friends group. I love to make lists. I can break down a project into a 7-point bullet list for just about anything I do at my current job. I could probably do it for just about anything that needs doing around the house, although I'm a little lazier there, I admit. Find that friend who loves to make lists. Find that friend who loves Excel spreadsheets and use them. Have them be your project manager for everything that you do. They can talk to you about how many people you need to do it, how long it will take, what happens when one of those key people is gone, how you can make up for it. It also helps to keep track of keeping track of what people are doing on a regular basis can help prevent burnout. Like, Jenny doesn't want to work in the field every day of every month of every year. Like, eventually she's going to get a little sick of it, even if she loves it at the beginning. And it's really important to rotate people through things that they are good and or interested in. And those are two different things. It's going to be really hard for kids, I think, in particular in this scenario, because, kids want to do what they want to do and they don't know what they're good at yet. And just because they want to do a thing doesn't mean they're not going to screw it up spectacularly because they're learning. And all of these things are things you have to take into consideration when you have projects that need to be done. I mean, it might be less efficient and take longer to teach your 13-year-old how to do a task, but at the end of that project, that 13-year-old now has more education and they're a little more useful in the next project. And each one they go through, they get a little better and a little smarter and a little faster. So being realistic about that is super important.
And they have variety.
Yes.
Go on, Kathy.
And if you can teach that 13-year-old how to do that task, maybe that frees up someone with other or better different experiences for a different task.
Yep.
One of the things we see in fiction a lot is that the charismatic leader needs to be the leader, the person that everybody sees, but doesn't need to be the one actually managing the day-to-day work. And so the manager role is very important.
I like to think of myself as the power behind the throne, but that's
Well, excellent. That has been our Managing Your Apocalypse Survival team. And we hope you'll come back and join us for more of the For Survival snippets. And until later, we will see you again. And this is the Cabal of Unlikely Suspects. Just remember, we're completely harmless.